Marcus Thompson had always been the kind of person who refused to let life's challenges define him. Growing up in a small, tight-knit neighborhood where opportunities were scarce, he learned early on that success would require more than just talent. It demanded perseverance, hard work, and an unshakable belief in himself. His parents worked tirelessly to provide for their family, often taking on multiple jobs just to make ends meet. Despite these hardships, they instilled in Marcus the importance of education and self-respect. They encouraged him to dream big and reminded him daily that his circumstances didn't have to dictate his future. From a young age, Marcus stood out as a bright and curious student. While other kids spent their afternoons playing video games or hanging out at the park, Marcus could often be found buried in books or working on extra assignments his teachers gave him. He loved learning, not because it came easily to him, but because he saw it as a way to break free from the limitations imposed by his environment. School became his sanctuary, a place where he felt seen and valued for his potential rather than judged for where he came from. As Marcus grew older, his academic achievements began to pile up. He was consistently at the top of his class, earning awards and scholarships that helped ease some of the financial burdens on his family. But with every accomplishment came whispers of doubt from those around him. Some people in his community accused him of trying to act better than everyone else, while others dismissed his success as luck or favoritism. Even teachers occasionally underestimated him, assuming that his race or background somehow limited his abilities. Yet none of this deterred Marcus. If anything, it fueled his determination to prove them wrong. After high school, Marcus earned a full scholarship to one of the most prestigious universities in the country. Leaving behind everything, familiar was daunting, but he knew this was his chance to create a better future. Not just for himself, but for his family, too. College wasn't easy. The workload was intense, and being one of the few black students in his program sometimes made him feel like an outsider. Still, Marcus embraced the challenge, pouring all his energy into excelling academically. By the time he graduated, he had not only maintained a perfect GPA, but also secured admission to one of the nation's top law schools. Law school proved to be another uphill battle, but Marcus thrived under pressure. Balancing rigorous coursework, internships, and extracurricular activities tested his limits, yet he never lost sight of his ultimate goal: becoming a lawyer who could advocate for justice and equality. When graduation day finally arrived, Marcus achieved something truly remarkable. He was named Valedictorian, making history as the first black student to receive the honor at his law school. It was a moment of immense pride for him and his family, a testament to years of relentless effort and sacrifice. Amidst all his professional achievements, Marcus had also found love. He met Emily Carter during his second year of law school when they were assigned to work together on a group project. At first glance, they seemed like an unlikely pair. Emily came from a wealthy, well-connected family, while Marcus's upbringing couldn't have been more different. But what started as a partnership quickly blossomed into friendship and eventually turned into romance. What drew them together was their shared passion for justice and fairness, along with a deep mutual respect for each other's values and ambitions. Emily admired Marcus's drive and intelligence, and she often joked that he was the smartest person she'd ever met. For Marcus, Emily represented stability and support, qualities he cherished deeply given the chaos he'd experienced growing up. Their relationship wasn't without its challenges, though. Navigating cultural differences and managing expectations from both sides required patience and understanding. Still, they believed their love was strong enough to overcome any obstacle. When Marcus decided it was time to introduce Emily to his family, the visit went smoothly. His parents welcomed her warmly, impressed by her kindness and genuine interest in getting to know them. In return, Emily marveled at the warmth and hospitality of Marcus's household, which was so different from the formal dinners and stiff conversations she was used to at home. The two families might have come from opposite ends of the spectrum, but there was no denying the chemistry between Marcus and Emily. However, meeting Emily's family promised to be a completely different experience. The Carters were known for their old-fashioned views and rigid standards. They belonged to a world of privilege, where appearances mattered almost as much as substance. Marcus had heard stories about how critical they could be, especially when it came to outsiders entering their inner circle. Though Emily assured him that her family would come around once they got to know him, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling of unease as he prepared to step into their home for the first time. Little did he know, this visit would test not only his patience but also his ability to rise above prejudice and prove his worth in ways he hadn't anticipated. The day of the dinner arrived, and Marcus felt a mix of excitement and apprehension as he and Emily drove to her parents' house. The Carters lived in an upscale neighborhood, with manicured lawns and sprawling homes that seemed to whisper wealth and privilege. As they pulled into the driveway, Marcus couldn't help but notice how different this world was from the one he grew up in. It wasn't just the size of the houses or the gleaming cars parked outside. It was the air of exclusivity that hung over everything. He reminded himself to stay calm and focus on making a good impression. Emily's mother greeted them at the door with a polite smile, though there was something guarded about her expression. "Marcus, it's so nice to finally meet you," she said, extending her hand. Her tone was pleasant enough, but Marcus detected a faint hesitation, as if she were sizing him up before deciding whether he was worthy of her daughter. "Mr. Carter," Emily's father followed suit, shaking Marcus's hand firmly but briefly, his demeanor giving nothing away. The rest of the family, Emily's younger brother, her aunt and uncle, and a few cousins, were already seated in the living room, sipping wine and chatting casually. The initial small talk went smoothly, with everyone asking predictable questions about Marcus's career plans and hobbies. When Emily mentioned that Marcus had recently graduated from law school, her cousin Sarah perked up. "Law school? That must have been tough," she said, tilting her head slightly. Marcus smiled politely. "It definitely had its challenges, but I enjoyed every moment of it." Before he could elaborate further, Emily's Uncle Charles leaned forward, his lips curling into what might have been mistaken for a friendly grin, if not for the glint of mockery in his eyes. "Valedictorian, huh?" he said, his voice carrying just a hint of sarcasm. "Well, I suppose it's easier to stand out when there aren't many competitors." The room fell silent for a split second, and then a few nervous chuckles rippled through the group. Emily stiffened beside Marcus, her face flushing red. Marcus felt his stomach tighten, but he forced himself to remain composed. He glanced at Emily, whose wide eyes begged him to ignore the comment. Instead, he turned to Charles and replied calmly, "I think standing out is always challenging, no matter the circumstances. Hard work doesn't discriminate based on numbers, it's about dedication and perseverance." His words hung in the air, and for a moment it seemed like Charles might back down. But instead he smirked again, clearly unimpressed. "Oh, come. Now, Charles," Emily's father interjected, his tone light but laced with condescension. "Let's give Marcus credit where it's due. After all, we can't deny that diversity initiatives are doing wonders these days." A murmur of agreement swept through the room, though Marcus noticed that none of them looked directly at him. Their smiles were tight, their laughter forced, as if they were trying to mask their discomfort, or perhaps their disdain. Emily tried to steer the conversation in a different direction, mentioning a recent trip she and Marcus had taken together. But the damage had already been done. Every attempt to change the subject seemed to circle back to Marcus's achievements, each remark more cutting than the last. One cousin joked that Marcus must have aced his exams because professors were afraid of appearing biased if they graded him too harshly. Another commented that affirmative action programs had certainly opened doors for people like him. Even Emily's usually quiet younger brother chimed in, asking if Marcus planned to use his degree to help his community or go corporate. Each jab hit its mark, leaving Marcus feeling like he was standing in front of a firing squad. He wanted to defend himself, to explain that his success wasn't handed to him. It was earned through countless late-night studying, missed holidays with his family, and sacrifices most people couldn't even imagine. Yet he knew responding with anger would only play into their stereotypes, so he chose his words carefully, offering measured responses that revealed his intelligence without escalating the tension. By the time dessert was served, Marcus felt drained. The Carters' thinly veiled insults continued throughout the meal, disguised as harmless banter or curious inquiries. They questioned his choice of law school, implying that it wasn't prestigious enough to justify his accomplishments. They raised eyebrows at his decision to pursue public interest law, rather than joining a high-paying firm, suggesting that he lacked ambition, and they repeatedly brought up his background, framing it as both a disadvantage and a crutch. Despite their relentless scrutiny, Marcus refused to let them see how much their words affected him. He maintained a calm exterior, answering their questions with grace and poise. Inside, however, he was seething. How dare they reduce years of hard work to lazy assumptions and baseless accusations? Didn't they realize how disrespectful and frankly hypocritical their comments were? As the evening drew to a close, Marcus found himself replaying their remarks over and over in his mind. Was this how Emily's family really saw him? Did they view him as some charity case, someone who didn't belong in their polished, privileged world? Worse still, did Emily agree with them? She had been apologetic throughout the night, squeezing his hand under the table whenever things got particularly uncomfortable, but Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that maybe, deep down, she harbored some of the same doubts. When they finally left the Carter's house, Marcus exhaled deeply, the weight of the evening pressing heavily on his shoulders. Emily reached for his hand, her voice trembling as she said, "I'm so sorry, Marcus. They had no right to treat you that way. None of what they said is true. You know that, right?" Marcus nodded, though he wasn't entirely convinced. The Carter's words lingered in his mind like a dark cloud, casting doubt on everything he'd worked so hard to achieve. For the first time in years, he wondered if his efforts mattered at all. Could brilliance truly overcome prejudice? Or was he destined to fight this battle alone, forever proving himself to people who refused to see him for who he really was? The car ride home was quiet, the kind of silence that felt heavy and suffocating. Marcus stared out the window, watching the streetlights blur into streaks of orange as they drove. His mind replayed every word, every smirk, every thinly veiled insult from the Carter's dinner table. Emily sat beside him, her hands gripping the steering wheel tightly, her knuckles white with tension. She glanced at him occasionally, her eyes filled with guilt and concern, but she didn't say much. What could she say? Nothing would erase what had just happened. When they finally arrived back at Marcus's apartment, he thanked Emily for the ride and stepped inside without another word. He needed time to process everything, to sort through the jumble of emotions swirling in his chest. Anger, frustration, embarrassment, even a flicker of self-doubt, all of it threatened to overwhelm him. He sank onto the couch, resting his elbows on his knees and burying his face in his hands. For the first time in years, Marcus allowed himself to feel defeated. But defeat wasn't something Marcus was used to, and it didn't sit well with him. As the hours passed, his initial despair began to morph into something else: determination. The Carter's mockery had stung, yes, but it also ignited a fire within him. They thought they could dismiss his achievements, reduce them to stereotypes and assumptions. But Marcus knew better. He had worked too hard, sacrificed too much, to let their ignorance define him. If anything, their disrespect only strengthened his resolve to prove them wrong. The next morning, Marcus woke up with a clear plan in mind. He wouldn't confront the Carters directly, not yet anyway. Instead, he decided to invite them to witness his success firsthand. His law school commencement ceremony was just a few weeks away, and delivering the valedictory speech was one of the greatest honors of his life. It was an opportunity not only to celebrate his accomplishments, but also to share his story with the world. And if the Carters doubted the authenticity of his achievements, then he would show them, without raising his voice or losing his composure. Actions, after all, spoke louder than words. Marcus spent the following days drafting a formal invitation for Emily's family. He kept it simple and respectful, making sure to emphasize how much their presence would mean to him. "I understand that we may have different perspectives," he wrote, "but I hope you'll join me on this special day. It would mean a great deal to know that my loved ones, including those who challenge me, are there to support me." He handed the invitations, to Emily, trusting her to pass them along. Emily hesitated when she saw the envelopes. "Are you sure about this?" she asked, her brow furrowed with worry. "After what they said to you, do you really want them there?" Marcus nodded firmly. "Yes," he replied. "Because if they come, they'll see the truth for themselves. They can doubt me all they want, but they can't deny what's right in front of them. Besides, ignoring them won't change anything. This is my chance to rise above their negativity and show them who I am." Emily admired his courage, though. She couldn't help feeling uneasy. She knew her family's behavior had been unacceptable, and she feared they might embarrass themselves, or worse, hurt Marcus again, at the ceremony. Still, she respected his decision and promised to deliver the invitations personally. As the days leading up to the commencement ticked by, Marcus threw himself into preparing his speech. Writing it wasn't easy. He wanted to strike the perfect balance between personal reflection and universal inspiration. He started by recounting his own journey, describing the obstacles he'd faced growing up and the sacrifices his family had made to support him. He talked about the moments of doubt, the times when he questioned whether he truly belonged in spaces dominated by privilege and exclusion. But he also highlighted the triumphs, the late nights studying, the scholarships earned, the mentors who believed in him, and how each victory brought him closer to his dreams. Beyond his personal story, Marcus wanted his speech to resonate with a broader audience. He reflected on the importance of diversity in leadership, arguing that true progress required voices from all walks of life. He spoke about systemic inequality, acknowledging that while he had managed to overcome many barriers, countless others were still fighting for opportunities they deserved. Most importantly, he challenged listeners to examine their own biases and consider how they contributed to cycles of injustice. Success isn't measured by accolades or titles, Marcus wrote in one draft. It's measured by the impact we have on others, the doors we open, the tables we set, the paths we pave for those who come after us. True greatness lies not in rising above others, but in lifting others as we rise. Rehearsing the speech became a daily ritual for Marcus. He practiced in front of the mirror, tweaking phrases until they flowed smoothly. He recorded himself and listened back, critiquing his tone and pacing. He even invited Emily over one evening to hear him deliver it aloud. When he finished, she was speechless for a moment, her eyes glistening with tears. "That was incredible," she whispered. "You're going to blow everyone away." Despite her encouragement, Marcus couldn't shake the nerves that bubbled beneath the surface. What if the Carters showed up and mocked him again? What if his words fell flat, failing to make the impact he hoped for? These doubts haunted him, but he refused to let them take control. He reminded himself why he was doing this, not for validation from the Carters, but for himself. This was his moment, his platform, and no one could take that away from him. On the morning of the ceremony, Marcus dressed carefully, taking extra care with his cap and gown. As he stood in front of the mirror, he took a deep breath and repeated a mantra he'd carried with him since childhood: "You are enough." Those 3 words had gotten him through some of the toughest moments of his life, and today they steadied his nerves once more. Arriving at the venue, Marcus scanned the crowd during the procession, searching for familiar faces. His heart swelled when he spotted his parents beaming with pride sitting near the front row. Beside them were Emily and her family, including Charles, Mr. Carter, and the rest of the clan. Their presence surprised him, though he tried not to let it show. Whatever their reasons for coming, he was ready. Today wasn't about proving himself to them. It was about honoring his journey and inspiring others to believe in their own potential. As Marcus took his seat among his classmates, he felt a strange mix of calm and anticipation. The air buzzed with excitement, and the weight of the moment settled over him. In a few short minutes, he would step onto the stage and deliver the speech of a lifetime. He didn't know exactly how the Carters would react, but he was certain of one thing: he would leave nothing unsaid. The auditorium buzzed with energy as graduates filed onto the stage. their caps and gowns creating a sea of black, dotted with colorful stoles and cords. Families and friends filled the rows, cameras clicking and phones held high to capture every moment. Marcus sat among his classmates, his heart pounding in rhythm with the applause echoing through the hall. He glanced at the program in his hands one last time, rehearsing the opening lines of his speech in his mind. This was it, the culmination of years of sacrifice, struggle, and triumph. When the dean called his name to deliver the valedictory address, Marcus stood up slowly, smoothing out his gown as he walked toward the podium. The spotlight hit him, warm and bright, and for a brief second he froze, overwhelmed by the magnitude of the moment. But then he remembered his parents sitting in the front row, their faces glowing with pride, and Emily beside them, her eyes shining with encouragement. Taking a deep breath, Marcus stepped up to the microphone, adjusted it slightly, and began to speak. "Good afternoon," he started, his voice steady but soft, drawing the audience into silence. "Today marks not just the end of our journey, here at this institution, but the beginning of something far greater, a lifelong commitment to justice, equality, and service." His words hung in the air, commanding attention. As he scanned the crowd, his gaze briefly landed on Emily's family. Charles sat stiffly, arms crossed, while Mr. Carter leaned forward slightly, his expression unreadable. Marcus didn't let their presence distract him. Instead, he channeled his focus into the message he wanted to share. He began by recounting his own story, weaving together moments of adversity and resilience. "Growing up, I learned early on that success isn't handed to you. It's earned," he said, his tone reflective yet powerful. "There were days when doubt crept in, when people told me I didn't belong or that my dreams were too big for someone like me. But those voices only strengthened my resolve. They pushed me to work harder, to dream bigger, and to prove that talent has no boundaries." As he spoke, the audience remained silent, captivated by his authenticity. Parents nodded approvingly, students scribbled notes, and faculty members exchanged knowing glances. Even Emily's family seemed transfixed, their earlier skepticism replaced by curiosity. Marcus continued, delving deeper into the systemic challenges he had faced as a black man navigating spaces where diversity was often treated as an afterthought. "I've been asked, directly and indirectly, if my achievements are truly mine," he admitted, his voice rising slightly. "Am I here because of merit, or am I a product of quotas and affirmative action? Those questions sting, not because they're new, they're painfully familiar, but because they undermine the hard work and determination that brought me to this stage today." He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. "But instead of letting those doubts define me, I chose to rise above them. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that brilliance cannot be silenced, not by prejudice, not by ignorance, and certainly not by fear." The room erupted into spontaneous applause, the sound swelling like a wave. Marcus smiled faintly, grateful for the support but determined to stay focused. He transitioned to a broader discussion about the importance of representation and inclusion in leadership roles. "Diversity isn't just a checkbox to tick off," he emphasized, "it's a necessity. When we bring different perspectives to the table, we create solutions that are richer, more innovative, and more equitable. We owe it to ourselves and to future generations to build a world where everyone has a seat at that table." His words resonated deeply, particularly among the graduates seated behind him. Many of them had fought similar battles, facing barriers that tried to hold them back. Marcus's speech wasn't just about his journey, it was about theirs too. He encouraged them to use their education and privilege to uplift others, reminding them that true success wasn't measured by personal accolades, but by the positive impact they had on the world. Toward the end of his address, Marcus shifted gears, speaking directly to the skeptics in the room. Without naming names, he addressed the Carters' earlier comments head-on. "To those who question the validity of my achievements," he said, his voice firm but compassionate, "I invite you to look beyond your assumptions. Success isn't a zero-sum game, it doesn't diminish yours to acknowledge mine. And if you still doubt me, then I ask you this. Why does my success make you uncomfortable? What is it about seeing someone break barriers that challenges your worldview? The weight of his words settled over the audience like a thick fog. Some people shifted uncomfortably in their seats, while others nodded in agreement. Emily's father, who had initially dismissed Marcus's accomplishments, now stared at him intently, his jaw clenched. Charles, who had mocked him so cruelly during dinner, avoided eye contact altogether, his face flushed with what looked like shame. For the first time, Marcus saw cracks in their armor, their biases exposed, their defenses crumbling under the force of truth. Concluding his speech, Marcus offered a message of hope and unity. "Let us move forward not as competitors, but as collaborators," he urged. "Let us celebrate each other's victories, challenge each other's shortcomings, and strive together toward a better tomorrow. Because when we lift one another, up we all rise higher." By the time he finished, the entire auditorium was on its feet, cheering wildly. Tears streamed down faces, including those of Marcus's parents, who clapped until their hands hurt. Even Emily's family joined in the standing ovation, though their expressions betrayed a mix of emotions: pride, guilt, and perhaps even regret. As Marcus returned to his seat, he felt a sense of peace wash over him. He had done what he set out to do: silence their scorn with his brilliance. After the ceremony, the graduates spilled out onto the lawn, hugging loved ones and posing for photos. Marcus found himself surrounded by well-wishers, congratulating him on his speech and thanking him for inspiring them. Amidst the chaos, he spotted Emily making her way toward him, her eyes brimming with tears. She threw her arms around him, holding him tightly. "You did it," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You were incredible." Marcus hugged her back, feeling a wave of gratitude. "Thank you for being here," he replied softly, "for believing in me." As the crowd thinned, Marcus noticed Emily's father approaching cautiously, his demeanor markedly different from the dismissive attitude he'd displayed at dinner. Clearing his throat, Mr. Carter extended his hand. "Marcus," he began, his voice gruff but sincere. I want to apologize. Your speech, it made me realize how wrong I was to judge you based on stereotypes. You've earned every bit of your success, and I'm proud to call you part of our family." Marcus hesitated for a moment before shaking the older man's hand. "Thank you," he said simply, choosing his words carefully. "I hope we can continue to learn from each other moving forward." Charles approached next, visibly uncomfortable but determined to make amends. "Look, Marcus," he muttered, rubbing the back of his neck. "What I said at dinner, it was out of line. I shouldn't have doubted you. That speech, you proved me wrong, and I respect that." Though Marcus accepted their apologies graciously, he knew forgiveness wouldn't come overnight. Trust took time to rebuild, especially when it had been broken by prejudice. Still, he appreciated their willingness to acknowledge their mistakes, a step in the right direction. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light across the campus, Marcus reflected on the day's events. Delivering his speech hadn't just been about proving himself to the Carters. It had been about affirming his worth to himself. Their mockery had once threatened to dim his confidence, but now it fueled his determination to keep breaking barriers and inspiring others. For Marcus, this was only the beginning of a lifetime dedicated to justice, equality, and change. In the weeks following the commencement ceremony, Marcus's life transformed in ways he hadn't anticipated. His speech had resonated deeply with people far beyond the walls of the auditorium. Clips from his address were shared online, quickly, going viral as viewers praised his eloquence and courage. News outlets picked up the story, highlighting not only his academic achievements but also his ability to confront prejudice with grace and dignity. Invitations poured in, from universities eager to have him speak at their events, law firms offering prestigious positions, and community organizations seeking his guidance on diversity initiatives. At first, Marcus was overwhelmed by the attention. He had never sought fame or recognition. All he wanted was to use his education and experiences to make a difference. But as he read heartfelt messages from strangers who said his words inspired them to persevere through their own struggles, he realized the impact of his voice extended far beyond himself. People saw themselves in his story, his resilience, his determination, and his refusal to let others define him. It was humbling and empowering all at once. Emily stood by him throughout this whirlwind, supporting him while reminding him to stay grounded. She often teased him about becoming internet famous, but her pride in him was unmistakable. Their relationship grew stronger as they navigated this new chapter together. Emily admitted that watching Marcus handle her family's initial hostility with such poise had deepened her admiration for him. "You didn't just win them over," she told him one evening. "You showed them what real strength looks like." True to their word, the Carters began making efforts to mend fences. Charles reached out to Marcus personally, inviting him to lunch to discuss some of the issues raised in his speech. At first, Marcus was hesitant, unsure if he could trust the man who had mocked him so cruelly. But after much thought and encouragement from Emily, he agreed. Over coffee, Charles opened up about his upbringing, revealing how his own biases had been shaped by generational attitudes and societal norms. While Marcus didn't excuse his behavior, he appreciated the honesty and vulnerability. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away," Charles admitted, stirring his coffee absent-mindedly. "But I do want to understand, to see things from your perspective. Your speech made me realize how much work I still need to do." Marcus nodded, choosing his words carefully. "It's not easy to confront our own biases," he replied, "but acknowledging them is the first step toward change, and I'm willing to meet you halfway if you're serious about learning." Their conversation marked the beginning of an ongoing dialogue between Marcus and Emily's family. Mr. Carter, too, took steps to bridge the gap, attending a local panel discussion on racial equality alongside Marcus and Emily. Though awkward at times, these interactions helped break down barriers and foster mutual understanding. Slowly but surely, the Carters began to see Marcus not as an outsider or a stereotype, but as a remarkable individual whose brilliance demanded respect. Professionally, Marcus faced another set of challenges as he prepared to enter the legal field. The job offers were tempting, especially those from high-profile firms promising lucrative salaries and rapid career advancement. Yet Marcus remained committed to his original goal, using his skills to advocate for marginalized communities. After careful consideration, he accepted a position at a nonprofit organization dedicated to criminal justice reform. It wasn't the most glamorous path nor the most financially rewarding, but it aligned perfectly with his values. His decision surprised some of his peers, including a few classmates who couldn't fathom turning down six-figure salaries fresh out of law school. But Marcus knew what mattered most to him. "Success isn't about climbing the ladder as fast as possible," he explained to Emily during one late-night conversation. "It's about building something meaningful, something that lasts. If I can help even one person get a second chance, then everything I've worked for will be worth it." As he settled into his role, Marcus found fulfillment in the small victories. Whether it was securing parole for a wrongly convicted client or advocating for policy changes that addressed systemic inequities, every win reinforced his belief in the power of perseverance. His colleagues admired his dedication and quickly recognized him as a rising star in the field. Within months, he was leading workshops and mentoring younger lawyers, sharing the lessons he'd learned along the way. Meanwhile, Emily continued to support Marcus's mission, finding ways to contribute to his vision. As a journalist, she started writing articles that shed light on underreported social justice issues, amplifying voices that might otherwise go unheard. Together, they became a formidable team, united by their shared commitment to creating a fairer, more inclusive world. The Carters' transformation wasn't immediate, nor was it perfect. There were moments when old habits resurfaced, prompting uncomfortable conversations. But what mattered most was their willingness to listen and grow. They attended fundraisers for causes Marcus supported, donated to organizations working toward racial equity, and encouraged their friends and colleagues to engage in similar efforts. Even Emily's younger brother, who had once joked about Marcus's plans to help his community, expressed interest in volunteering at a local youth mentorship program. One evening, several months after graduation, the Carters hosted a small, gathering at their home to celebrate Marcus's accomplishments. It was a stark contrast to the tense dinner they had shared earlier. This time, the atmosphere was warm and welcoming, filled with genuine laughter and heartfelt conversations. Mr. Carter raised a toast, his voice steady but emotional. "Marcus, you've taught us more than we ever expected to learn," he said. "Your strength, humility, and unwavering belief in justice have changed us, for the better. Thank you for being part of our family." Tears welled up in Marcus's eyes as he looked around the room. For so long, he had feared rejection from people like the Carters, worried that their prejudices would overshadow his potential. Now, standing among them as an equal, he realized that change was possible, even in the unlikeliest of places. It required patience, empathy, and a willingness to challenge deeply ingrained beliefs. But above all, it required individuals brave enough to lead by example. That night, as Marcus drove home with Emily, he reflected on how far he had come. From the boy who once dreamed of escaping his circumstances to the man who now inspired others to dream bigger, his journey was a testament to the power of resilience. The Carters' scorn had once threatened to dim his confidence, but instead it fueled his determination to rise above. Their redemption proved that no one was beyond reaching, if given the chance to see the truth. Looking ahead, Marcus knew there would be more battles to fight, more barriers to break. But he faced the future with hope, knowing he wasn't alone. With Emily by his side, a supportive network of loved ones, and a growing platform to effect change, he was ready to tackle whatever came next. Because for Marcus Thompson, success wasn't defined by titles or accolades. It was measured by the lives he touched and the legacy he left behind. And as long as he kept pushing forward, he knew he could inspire others to do the same.